Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. The reason why I had to use multiple, starts is because we have an audience today spread across the globe. Thank you all for, coming here, being a part of this session, Ads.txt Unleashed. Okay, I hope you're able to see that. Yes. So we also, when we look at the Ads.txt Unleashed, and when I ask you to join us in a rocking session on Ads.txt, I'm sure, it kind of sounds oxymoronish to have Ads.txt and a rocking session in the same sentence. But that did not stop almost around 300, people registering for this webinar, representing close to around 80 organizations from across the globe. We have representation from US, we have representation from Canada, Europe, Asia. So truly a global audience that we have today. And I'm extremely happy to be, inviting you all, welcoming you all to join this, fantastic session on Ads.txt Unleashed. As Q1 winds up, as the days get longer, I'm sure a lot of us are recalibrating our plans that we made 3 months back. Some of the things might have been working phenomenally well. Some of the things might not have worked so well. So this is the time when probably towards the last week of March is when probably plans are kind of refreshed upon. And I do hope that some of the things that the panel, a very, very, very awesome panel that we have here today, will allow you to take away a few key, takeaways that will inform your strategy going forward, probably for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, or probably for the entire year. Before I hand it over to 𝐵𝐬, who is going to be our moderator today, I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Anand, who is the founder at Publir, and while being neutral, will still probably take a little more publisher perspective on this entire topic. And we have Vanessa, head of programmatic at Qortex. Again, while being neutral, will probably be leaning a little towards the SSP perspective on the topic. And we have our own Ashok, founder, CEO at DataBeat. And for those of you who are probably not very familiar with DataBeat, we have been in the business for the last 7 years, and we work with almost around 40 plus clients, team of around 250 plus people. But today it's not about DataBeat. Today it's more about the Ads.txt and how such a simple thing can probably help you to derive insights into a whole lot of different things. And before I hand it over to 𝐶𝐬, thank you so much, panel, for being here with us today, sharing your views on, looking at on the different perspectives that Ads.txt brings in. And 𝐶𝐬, of course, a very dear friend of ours with more than a decade of experience in ad tech, previously Senior Vice President at Insider, and now an advisor at Uplift. Even in some of the mock sessions that we had, the kind of knowledge that he brings to the table is phenomenal. And I'm sure, his inputs will be invaluable to the discussion today. So on that note, thank you all for joining in, and thank you, panel, for taking out your time. 𝐶𝐬, I will leave it to you to take it forward from here.
Thanks, and thanks for DataBeat hosting this panel. I'm very excited to moderate this panel today, as overall, I'm a firm believer that a solid understanding of ad tech foundations is really the key to success as we navigate through a lot of the changes in our ever-changing landscape. When we think about 2023 and 2024 and beyond, there have been a lot of trends and keywords in the marketplace, right? Aside from all the new discussions and debates about Google's privacy sandbox, our industry continued to progress on the topics of MFA, SPO, sustainability, traffic shaping, big throttling, QPS, and these terms. And really sitting in the middle of all of this is this small text file standard that developed by AB about 7 years ago called Ads.txt. It was initially developed to fight against ad fraud and unauthorized inventory sales. And now it has become a powerful tool to understand supply chain and vendor management. So in today's webinar, what we're going to do is cover some of those updates on topics around Ads.txt and share some network-wide observations from DataBeat. We'll also have two industry practitioners today who will share their perspective and best practices when it comes to the Ads.txt management. Our aim for this webinar today is to equip the audience ultimately with some knowledge and strategies to optimize your ad tech setup and maximize your potential revenue impact of the business by establishing a healthy partnership between both publishers and tech partners. So with that, what I'm going to do is kick off our panelists, have each of them to introduce themselves, their company, and share briefly some of their day-to-day involvement with the Ads.txt. So Anand, you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Anand Ramanathan from Publir. We operate a SaaS platform that helps publishers monetize their audiences. And our platform integrates ad mediation, crowdfunding, and subscriptions to provide a one-stop revenue source for our clients. Now, ad mediation is a big part of our business. Ads account for a majority of our revenue for our clients. And we work with dozens of SSPs and other demand sources. And so part of what we do, what our team does every day is maintain the Ads.txt for our clients and make sure they're updated. And since we keep adding and removing partners pretty much on a daily basis, I would say like Ads.txt management is a pretty day-to-day operation for us.
Great. Next up, Vanessa.
Hey everyone, thank you DataBeats for having me on this panel. I'm very excited to be here along with my fellow panelists. So for those that don't know me, I'm Vanessa, head of programmatic here at Qortex. Qortex is an intelligent video analytics company that turns video insights into enriching ad experiences via our proprietary AI technology. Prior to me coming to Qortex, I was at a major gaming publisher as their VP of programmatic, and before that I was at Nimbus, which is an in-app mediation platform overseeing yield and account management. So I've been in the ad tech space for quite a bit. How Ads.txt is relevant as part of my day-to-day, I work with our team regularly to ensure any new partnerships that we bring on get onboarded, and that their Ads.txt lines are updated within our master file. That master file ultimately translate into how does that reflect with our publishers and making sure that they update the Ads.txt line on their side.
Great. And last but not least, Ashok.
Thank you, Xiao, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. This is Ashok, founder and CEO at DataBeat. My life started as a publisher, and in the last few years of DataBeat, my role transitioned into a consultant, where I got a chance to see how things work across various publishers and ad tech companies. And while Ads.txt was supposed to be a simple thing, where you simply list some line items to bring in transparency and remove fraud, I'm still surprised to see how Ads.txt play a vital role, both for SSPs as well as publishers, as a tool that helps them to improve, optimize. So that personally was a pleasant surprise for me. That is the reason why I'm personally excited to discuss more about Ads.txt today.
Great. So just follow up on that topic, right? So as a overall analytics company working with both publishers and SSPs, I know you guys have a lot of network-wide insights around how Ads.txt looks across these different ecosystems. Can you share some more top-line observations with us, as we're kicking off today's webinar?
Yeah, definitely, Xiao. Like we work with some of the top names in the industry, both for publishers and SSPs. And, as professionals, all these companies try various things to optimize revenue for themselves and their clients. And as I said, I was surprised to see that Ads.txt is the #1 or #2 spot across all our SSP clients almost, that it brings more revenue than any other optimizations they're trying on. For example, our clients still work a lot on floors, dynamic floors, domain whitelisting, or ad formats, or domain categorizations and so on. But the #1 spot usually, or #2 spot, is taken by, let us call it optimization or maintenance, that is taking the prime spot. And also I see that a lot of our SSP clients in the last few quarters have been inward looking, where they're optimizing their tech stack and algorithms. The main thing they're working on is bringing down the costs of the huge server costs with the duplication, trying to bring efficiencies. And also all our clients have taken a responsibility towards sustainability, where they are trying to say, hey, let us bring down the carbon emissions. So for all these initiatives, I think Ads.txt being a gatekeeper is playing a very, very important role. I also like to show some data points that we have seen. If we can bring up like one of the charts, Shashank. So as you see the chart here, these are the average number of reseller entries each SSP has on an average publisher. So for example, SSP1 might have just 4 reseller entries on one domain, but on another domain, it might have 50 entries. So this in a way is a reflection of the amount of duplication or the number of possible paths that we have in the ecosystem. And, just to take it a little further, if you can load the chart too, we see here a very unique case. Like when I actually saw that, I thought this is the net sum of, like, if you see here, there are 374 reseller entries. I thought, okay, this is coming from all SSP together, but no. One of these publishers, domain one, has 394 reseller entries from one SSP only, right? Let us call it SSP X. So these are extreme cases, but I'm trying to use this to drive the point in terms of how sometimes people don't pay attention and how it might be overloading the systems. That is where I see, still there are miles to go in this for us to streamline and make things more efficient. Over to you, Shah.
Yeah, that's great. I know we already throw out some of these terms, right? So I think the 3 biggest terms right now we're talking about, one really from a relationship between SSPs and is really the concept of QPS and QPS budget. And then start these practices on the SSP side when it comes to bid throttling, and then publisher now start to look into traffic shaping. Ashok, do you want to just briefly define that, and then we can have a discussion between with Anand and Vanessa around those topics day to day. Ashok, you want to talk through some PS terms and the quick brief?
I thought on a mistake. So yes, definitely. See, the thing is, as we know across the industry, as the duplication started happening many years ago, the demand partners say, hey, you can only send maybe 1,000 and so on. And in the industry started doing random throttling. At the same time, it has been seen that the more the merrier has become the norm a few years ago. So let us say I have the, let me say OpenX demand directly. Hey, you know what? Let me integrate them through another integration channel. And a lot of data points showed that, in fact, adding another path is increasing your revenue. So in this reality of the more the merrier, what has happened is there was a huge overload of one request from a publisher becoming maybe 50 or 100 requests reaching the DSPs, putting enormous load on the ad servers of SSPs as well as the DSPs. So with this, I still feel we have miles to go there, where is the throttling or the traffic shaping, should it happen at a publisher level or the SSP level or the DSP level? I think our space is still young and new, right? Though we have seen so many things happening, a lot of the concepts we are actively talking today, they're only as fresh as 2-3 years old. So I feel this ecosystem should give a chance for this to naturally evolve, to see what ways in which we can still continue to innovate, leaving a possibility to test and try things. And I think, yes, this year probably, outside, of course, the cookie and AI has taken over the discussion. But in the background, when you look into the core business, traffic shaping is the one that is playing a prominent role across the ecosystem.
Great. I think a lot of data shared kind of illustrates team management, transparency, and preventing ad fraud or misrepresentation into this new world of SPO. How do we think about network duplication and managing vendors? So let me just bring back to the day-to-day. I think, our prep session, there's some really ideas in terms of the challenges and pain points. So publishers managing their ad files and keeping them current, as well as from an SSP standpoint, how they're looking at the use cases. So I want to throw this question to Anand and Vanessa. What are the biggest challenges and pain points from your day-to-day when it comes to Ads.txt management with either your publisher clients or the SSP management itself? Anand, you want to start?
So I think from a publisher standpoint, I think Ashok addressed the main pain point, right? Which is Ads.txt was supposed to make the whole header bidding and the programmatic marketplace more transparent and decrease the supply path for folks who want to, for advertisers who want to advertise on a website. You want the number of hoops to be as low as possible. And Ads.txt was initially supposed to facilitate that. But now what we're seeing is every SSP we work with has multiple reseller accounts, SSPs calling one another. And you've gotten to a point where I think the examples that Ashok showed us with these sites having hundreds of entries and hundreds of SSPs listed, that's the big pain point from our standpoint, is just the how big the Ads.txt file gets and how often we have to maintain it and manage it, right? The other big pain point for us is just because of the way the Ads.txt is architected, right? We're now asking publishers, a lot of them are not tech savvy, to update a text file on their server. And oftentimes we'll send them an Ads.txt entry to put up. They'll send it to their developer. And it can take a week or two sometimes to just add or remove an entry on their Ads.txt file. Now, there are ways around that we can talk about. But those are, I think, from a publisher standpoint, or somebody who works with publishers, that's our biggest pain point, just maintaining that Ads.txt file and making sure that it's as small as possible.
Great. I remember the couple of times I went to a new publisher, the first question is always, who actually manages the Ads.txt? Is there actually a separate file I can push? Is there a ticketing system? And there's always different answers to that, right? So, I think, sometimes it's almost like an overlooked topic. And when we start talking about vendors, it becomes such a pain point.
I remember
Vanessa, I know you've been.
This, if I can show, when we first started this, I think 2017 or 18, when IB said you guys start doing this, we would send that Ads.txt to a publisher, and a lot of them didn't know how to upload an Ads.txt file on their server. So they'd create an Ads.html file and go back and forth. And so it was very complicated at the beginning. Now I think there are plugins to do that. But yeah, it's not an easy thing technically for publishers to do as well.
Yep, absolutely. I know, Vanessa, you've been dealing with that when you're on the publisher side. Now you're on the SSP side. What are the other headaches you're seeing right now?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting because all of the panelists have actually answered our pain point. And so, I think the biggest challenge from our end as we're seeing is like the communication process, the grueling, daunting time it takes for a publisher to sometimes update their ads.txt file. Anand, you kind of spoke on all of those points as far as it's kind of grueling. I don't think there's a standardized process. It seems like on some of the pub side, but from our perspective, it does take a long time to get those ads.txt line updated whenever we kind of had to update ours. And so, and Ashok, you spoke to this as well, I think there's really an underestimated value for ads.txt because it was started so long ago. I don't think it's a priority for certain publishers, depending on the organization. Like Anand, I know you're an advocate for this, but I don't think that's the case across the board for a lot of publishers. And so because it's an afterthought, and oftentimes I find companies are so focused on new business revenue opportunities, they often forget of what can we do today that's already existing within the current systems. And from our side, that is a challenge that we've seen, is that when the communication flow happens, it takes a long time for the publishers to, update those ads.txt line.
That's great. The other topic I want to bring up is really around when we start thinking about programmatic. Programmatic also has shifted from a lot of the remnant backfill and just sort of get a liquidity of the inventory into the different type of programmatic, right? In terms of PMP deals and all the private auctions and those deal setups. I know one of the things, Vanessa, you've been also dealing with is really around once those deal setups start to happen, it's not just about the supply path and those conversations, but it's a whole different set of conversation that affects our .txt setup. Can you just shed more light on that?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a learning experience. Like, previously coming from the pub side and now kind of being on the opposite end of it, I truly understand why some SSPs would often try to include some of those reseller lines. I can't say for certain, that every SSP is obviously doing this. I think it kind of goes back to the being transparent with your publishers and making sure publishers are having active communication with their SSPs as far as like, if we're to include this line, what does that mean? From our perspective, there are certain buyers that are particular as far as where those PMP deals get trafficked. And while it may look like that it's an SSP line that's not our direct line, that is the case, right? Because it is contingent on the buyer. It is also contingent on the setup, and I can say that for certain because I'm the one handling the PMP and curation deals. So, I think it goes back to making sure publishers are having the right communication with their SSPs, asking a lot of some of those questions and understanding which ones to include. Not all of them certainly, but it kind of, you have to have like that level of understanding of how they're getting set up.
That's great. Anand, we're getting back to your end. When you think about how to optimize that DAX.txt file entry lines and those things, can you tell us more, some about the experience you have around that, and then also what are the current limitations when we think about this piece of technology that's about 7 years old when it comes to the overall management?
Yeah, the one thing that always surprised me is why this was a text file and not a JSON file. We have set up a JSON, so they could have easily made a JSON extension, so it could have been after JSON. But that's a quirk of, I think, how this got started. So I think, when we look at day-to-day management of Ads.txt, right, I think one of the ways we've gotten around the latency problem with us sending an Ads entry to a client and them taking like days to update it is, where possible, when we onboard a new client, we have them redirect their Ads.txt to our CDN, so that once they do the redirect once, they don't need to touch the Ads.txt part at all. Anytime we work with a new provider, we need to maintain the Ads.txt file, we can do it on our end. Because now when you go to a site.com/Ads.txt, it redirects to a Publir.com CDN, a unique Ads.txt file for them. So that's an initiative that we think helps, and I think IAB allows us to do one-hop redirects. So if they redirect the Ads.txt to us, it works. And so one of the things we are trying to do is get more publishers to do that, so that we're limiting the latency between updating Ads.txt entries. The other thing that will help us is we have a lot of Ads.txt entries on our files, but we don't really get reporting on how much of the revenue can we attribute to the seller ID that we have on our Ads.txt file. So if there's any way we could get reporting by seller ID, then we could take a look at our Ads.txt file, see where the majority of our revenues are coming from, and basically trip down the Ads.txt files. Right now, the problem is I think there is a tendency to add entries to Ads.txt files, but not to remove them. And so these have a tendency to get bigger over time, because there's no incentive for anybody to remove them. I think from a publisher standpoint, we don't know the harm that you would receive by removing an Ads.txt entry. It might take weeks for us to figure out statistically what impact removing an entry had. But if you're able to get reporting based on that, the seller IDs there, it would make our jobs a lot easier, I think.
Yep. One of the things that definitely feels like a huge pain point that you mentioned is really some of the readability, right? Both in terms of why it's not a JSON or in terms of all the seed IDs. So, when we review those things, it's really hard to really understand what those IDs are and whether those are the correct IDs, and just validating those. You mentioned something around the reporting. I think that's one piece where a lot of times when we're trying to, one of the motivators for some of the publishers start to look at how to thin down their Ads.txt file is this new trend around looking at sustainability measurement is based off of the Ads.txt file, right? So every single time there's a new entry, they send some of the measurement companies start to assign a specific amount of carbon emission to individual entries. Ads.txt, Shak, you worked with some of your existing publisher partners on trimming those. Do you have any kind of like a case study to share there in terms of the revenue impact and Ads.txt
Yes.
trimming?
So again, initially I mentioned, right, like for our SSPs, ads.txt cleanup or optimization is always in the number one, number two. But we also have seen a good number of our publishers benefit from, recalibrating their ads.txt constantly. So for one of our top publisher, we have done an exercise where they remove a good number of the reseller entries, and we have seen in a good number of cases, right, the revenue coming from direct plus reseller was actually less than the revenue coming when you remove the ads.txt reseller entry. So to make myself clear, previously if you're getting X from direct, Y from reseller, by removing the reseller, you are getting X plus Y plus Z as a result of that removal. I think why this could be happening is, again, going back to throttling, right? You are getting a billion requests. Which one are you removing? Your algorithms might say that, hey, from domain A, I'm getting, a million requests. This is the average output. And because of the duplication, you're not going to perform so well on that. And your algorithm might be deprioritizing, thinking that, hey, for the million requests, I'm making only X amount of revenue. So when you intelligently try to optimize the paths there, and some of them, probably intelligence is also probably an exaggerated word, you simply look into some very common sense ways of sorting them in a list and trying to rearrange them, it started giving much better revenue. I think the main thing is, sorry, go ahead please, Vanessa.
Oh no, Ashok, please finish your thought.
So I think still $1 million question is, nobody knows which path works the best. So it's only through trial and error, I feel, some of these things have to be figured. And, I think there are only certain things which a programmatic team have in their hands to try. And this, I feel, is a very important tool, which often gets probably sidelined.
Yep.
That's great. Yep. Yeah, Vanessa, go for it.
Yep. The one thing I just kind of wanted to help kind of provide a bit more clarity on the opposite side of it, Ashok, because you mentioned like the bit throttling, QPS thresholds, and whatnot. I know the one thing that we're trying to do is trying to be more communicative with some of the publishers, because ideally that comes from the publisher, right? The best way to clean up that entire supply path is having the publisher send you the appropriate traffic in which that buyer wants to bid on. So for example, there's certain regions that we don't want to participate in, like maybe it's an APAC region or whatnot. And so as opposed to throttling the publisher, and because the DSPs that we're also directly connected to, there is a limit. And so I know from our perspective, we've been trying to be more communicative with the publisher, like, please don't send us this region, only send us this. And I think that's actually the best way. It all goes back to like the communication and the relationship that these publishers have with the SSPs to kind of inform them, like, we don't want to see this, to help optimize that connection. Because not only will it help the publisher in terms of server costs, it also helps like the SSP too. The SSPs are still getting hit with all of that volume that comes from the publishers, and it's honestly a win-win. If that inventory is not being monetized on, then the publisher shouldn't be wasting those requests. Because obviously servers charge the publishers, we also get charged on the SSP side. And so, that really goes back to like how to work better together and collaboratively to help kind of close the gap together. It's really telling the publishers what you want to see and what you don't want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the key themes really around some of these things, right? When you think about the two concepts, one on the SSP side, which is around bid throttling. The other one is around on the publisher side when it comes to traffic shaping, which is just like only sending certain things to SSP versus not. Essentially, everyone is trying to trim so that we can maximize the overall yield or really optimize. There's the metrics, which is yield per bid request, right? So, how do we coordinate those things so that one trimming does not really hurt the other? Is really a huge question. I think, Vanessa, you mentioned really a lot of that has to do with the communication between the publishers and SSPs. I think on your end, when you think about that equation, what are the information generally that would be super helpful for publishers to understand that, so that you can do the appropriate things. And so what are the things that you wish SSPs are providing that would be helpful for you, so that you can make the right decisions?
Yes, I think the one that Vanessa mentioned, which is super useful to us, is if an SSP does not want or can't monetize traffic from a certain geo, if they let us know, what, hey, only send us traffic from this geo or this location, it makes it easier for us, I think, to put them up and make sure we're not sending them requests that they're not set up to monetize. So that is useful, I think, to us. The other thing is, to the extent that they have some requirements in terms of frequency capping and stuff like that too, that also helps us, I think. So, pretty much anything that the SSP thinks will not monetize on their network, if they let us know up front, we can't accommodate every request, I think, because of the way, Pre-bid is set up on Google Ad Manager and stuff like that. But if we know the expectations up front, we can try to accommodate them as best as possible.
Yeah, and then Vanessa, from your side, as you're talking to publishers, what are the questions that you actually want publisher to ask that they're not really asking? Just sort of give us a checklist of those.
Yeah, I'd have to say probably what would be most beneficial to publishers, like if an SSP asks you to include to a reseller line, ask that SSP what's the unique value in terms of connecting that reseller line if that publisher is already directly connected to them. If they voice that it's campaigns, like in our particular instance, that is oftentimes the case. What types of campaigns do they have? What types of PMP deals? Duration of those campaign flight dates? I'm a huge proponent for being honest and open and transparency. For anyone who knows me in the space, like you just have to be open and candid. And if we are all to try and do our part into cleaning up the ad tech ecosystem, then we all need to be open and receptive to what the other party is saying to one another to really kind of, do your part. Because Ads.txt has been going on for how long now, and we still haven't gotten it right.
Yeah. I know our chat has been pretty active with a lot of different questions. I know there's some questions that we'll kind of discuss as we're going through our prep session. So one of them, I think, Ashok, you may have some more information around is, as if SSPs have multiple entries, right, both direct and resellers, but they don't really confirm how they want the different integration. I presume that's TAM versus pre-bid versus some OB lines. How do we actually, as a publisher, evaluate and optimize that kind of ad hoc TXT setup? Like, which path is usually, the right path?
Yeah, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, we have done specific projects at our SSPs to understand, hey, is there one path that is really our most working path? And we didn't come across an answer, right? We realized we need TAM, we need direct connections, we need pre-bid client, we need pre-bid server as well, right? So in this, one of the things also is typically publishers are also trying to be a little bit conscious and say, hey, I can only accept 5 line entries from you, right? Or I can only accept 10 line items entries from you. And I think while Ads.txt is great, this is the place where limitations, I feel, start coming into the play, where, if the publisher wants only 5 or 10 entries, without actually trying, the SSP or the publisher doesn't know which paths are the best. And because Ads.txt entries are acting as a gatekeeper, that removes the power of testing in this equation. And if it is something that the programmatic team of the publisher can do, they would do it any day. But what happens is, I have seen it takes, as you initially said, 𝐿𝐻𝐬, what is the way to update the Ads.txt? It could take 1 week, 2 weeks. And it's also convincing somebody else. It's not just the time, but the need to communicate and convince somebody. People avoid that. So I see simply 10 entries being shared and that they stay like that forever. And I also have seen if one of the relationship of the SSPs goes bad, and that is in the 10 entries, SSP don't go there and try to say, hey, remove this entry and add this, because they feel the publisher doesn't feel good that they try to, in a way, constantly ask them for a favor, right? This is seen as an SSP asking for a favor, right? I think this is where probably the mindset of, publishers also could change, like, hey, we need to make a case that changing a line item should not be seen as a pain either in their internal teams or with the SSPs, so that people can really try out unique demand and test out more things.
Yep. I'll add some more techniques into this equation as well. So certainly, when we look at some of the integration types, different containers have different timeout settings. Different container can provide different type of bit information. So certainly, each integration is different to different publishers. So to Ashok's point, it's really around testing for a lot of publishers. And one of the main techniques is that, as you're getting the Ads.txt file from SSPs, as a publisher, you can mark up with different information so that you have better understanding of what each line is about. So later on, when you're auditing those, you then can say, oh, if TAM is not working or if previous line is not working, let's strike that out. At least you can easily find those lines, right? So I'm a huge proponent of, part of the programmatic or yield team's job is to kind of organize those things. So then once you're getting those things more organized with the different hashes, then when you're managing it, you're not like trying to find your record, right? So when you go through some of the Ads.txt files of some of the publishers, there's some really good examples where people certainly mark up the different creative types. They will also mark up some of the integration types, right? And then in the overall scheme of sustainability, again, Ads.txt file is a global file, so it doesn't have, you may have a line, but that line is really only applicable in Australia, let's say, right? So sometimes a publisher will mark up that specific line with a specific geo. So those are all the different techniques so that at least you're clear about what each line means, so that you can actually actively manage those. So this is from a SSP with direct publishers only. Some of the demand partners ask them to publish their lines, right, and as direct instead of reseller. So what would this lead to when it comes to the overall setup?
Yeah, so I think from a publisher standpoint, right, the IAB guidelines are pretty clear, right? So a provider is a direct provider if they directly pay the publisher, right? So the way we work with our publishers is, we have all the SSPs pay us as Publir, and then we then collect money and pay the publishers, right? So purely definitionally, there's only one direct relationship that a publisher has with the mediator like Publir, and everybody else that goes through is a reseller because they are not directly paying the publisher, right? So it's easier to have that definition of what a direct and reseller is and stick to it because that makes it more consistent, I think, right? Yeah, we do get requests from time to time from SSP saying, no, we want to have a direct line there. And, we do see some SSPs perform better when they have a direct line there. But our philosophy has always been, no, let's be consistent and let's make sure logically what we're doing makes sense, right? So I think we have made exceptions in some cases, but we prefer to have these labels clearly defined and adhere to the definitions that the IAB provides for these labels.
We have one question from Sebastian. Have there been any measured results from higher green initiative scores, right, such as like Scope 3 or the carbon initiatives versus the revenue impact? And in the light of that, like how do you then optimize or having those conversations with SSPs?
See, I think this is still an ongoing process. This is something where the ad tech companies are actively working to make that happen. So yes, the definition and the score gives the North Star for publishers, right? In general, not going into meetings saying that we are working towards it, but saying, hey, I'm aiming to go from a score X to score Y, makes that possible, and also having a consistent guideline that comes as a background of the scope helps. But I still think it is only its infancy. I don't think it has achieved the set objective. because as I have shared in the previous slide, right, the average number of entries, the paths that people are taking are still too many. And I also feel one thing with our space is there are very few hands and they have a lot of, responsibilities to shoulder, right? That also makes it difficult for the individuals to honestly go and explore any concept to its depth. And that's that also puts all these things, like, for example, why is editing a text file such a painful thing? Not really, right? But this is one of the 50 responsibilities your programmatic partner at the publisher needs to do, and how much time are they going to give to that? So I would put it under the same bucket in terms of how much progress we have made in terms of some of the deduplication or sustainability. But I think many SSPs are doing a conscious inward looking to make this more green and efficient, for sure.
Yep, I kind of want to echo
Vanessa, on your end, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I kind of want to echo what Ashok mentioned. I mean, while it's kind of a bit difficult to measure, I think oftentimes, if anything, what could be measured is probably potentially margin. So like if you're trying to reduce the amount of ad requests, theoretically speaking, because you're sending less, the costs that would have already been associated with whatever ad server you're tied to, it would actually be less for, let's say, that month's billing period, because you're reducing emissions or frequently how many ad requests you're sending to the SSPs. In theory, you should be pocketing more. So I think that might be one way to kind of help justify an Ads.txt initiative from that perspective.
Yeah. On your end, are you seeing like some of these conversations start happening with some of the publisher partners on your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think the green initiative is a good one. Obviously, we all want to do a part to reduce carbon emissions and make things more efficient, right? But the other big imperative from a publisher standpoint is, the less hoops an advertiser has to go to get to a publisher, the more of the money the publisher keeps, right? So in an ideal world for us, if I can just have like 6 or 7 Ads.txt entry, right? I've got Google, Amazon, I've got, OpenX, Publir, Rubicon, Magnite, the big SSPs, right? And the money gets right from the SSPs to the publisher. It reduces a lot of intermediaries who also take a commission, I think. So just from a profit standpoint, keeping the Ads.txt small and consistent is a good business imperative, even not considering the carbon emission part of it.
Yeah, I think, when certainly green initiative is quite early. And I think everyone's trying to figure out what the impact is, right? So, I think oftentimes, personally, I look at it from a macro standpoint, right? So how many players is in the space? How many hoops there in the middle, right? So whenever there's a new player plus a new hoop or player hoop combo, there's a cost to it, right? There's a cost in computing. So when all those costs add up, that's really creates this inflated middle around ad tech. So the whole green initiative ultimately is trying to solve that problem, right? So our day-to-day, we kind of try to say, okay, let's, instead of trimming, like I said, horizontally, let's trim vertically, or however direction you're going with, then becomes, okay, instead of surfacing all of the opportunities to all the SSPs, let me only surface half of my opportunity to these type of SSPs and start creating those different things. But ultimately, what that may result in is unfair competition almost in another way, because not all of your inventory is actually getting evaluated in a certain way. And I think ultimately, there's one piece of this is the green initiative, which is around properly measuring and assessing the carbon emissions from an industry standpoint, but really operationally is really around how do you collectively work with your SSP partners so that we can all create the most efficient way of transaction, right? So because every single time when the ratio of bid one to bid request goes down, then there's always going to be cost of that auction, right? And those things add up ultimately to the publisher's pocket. I want to do a time check. I know there's a lot of questions or feedback from the quizzes. So we're going to review those things, and then we're going to follow up after panel. And with that, I want to thank all of our panelists, Anand, Vanessa, and Ashok, for all your insights, and DataBeat for hosting. And we hope, with these type of topics, we're going to have more of these different topics to bring the publishers as well as SSPs all together to talk about this, so that we can build a more healthy ecosystem together.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been great discussions, and great to meet my fellow panelists here. And Xiao, thanks for hosting. But this was a lot of fun.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
It's great.
Thank you, Xiao. Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
So on that note,
So have a good one.
I'm, I think probably even if we extend it for another 45 minutes, I'm pretty sure we will not be able to close the questions. There are way too many questions that are coming in. We should probably plan for an encore. So on that note, on behalf of DataBeat, let me thank the panel, Anand, Vanessa, Xiao, for graciously accepting our invite, being here with us today, sharing your insights in terms of how a very, very, very simple Ads.txt line, as Anand mentioned, as Vanessa mentioned, something which probably nobody pays attention to. Suddenly, we are speaking about a whole lot of things here. When I look at the chat here, I see supply path optimizations. I see people speaking about the green emissions. So something as simple as that, being able to impact at so many different levels, obviously, I think is one of the key takeaways for every single person who has attended this webinar today, irrespective of whether you're on the SSP side of things or whether you're on the publisher side of things. Secondly, I would also want to take this opportunity to thank Xiao personally once again for being a moderator on this session, very patiently preparing the entire flow, coming out with a couple of practice sessions, etc., etc. So thank you so much, Xiao. Thank you for being there and supporting, and all of you on the call today. I hope, or rather we hope, that there was enough for you to take in, make sense of, and obviously be able to apply it back into your own businesses. I see that when I run through the guest list, there were a lot of people across the hierarchy, somebody from a CEO level to somebody who's hands-on. So a lot of stuff that we discussed today was quite strategic in nature, and at the same time was also something that helps you in your day-to-day. In fact, some of the questions that were being asked in terms of what are the kind of plugins that we can use to make sure that Ads.txt, etc., are being maintained well. So there is a lot of stuff across the spectrum for a whole lot of people. So if at all you have any further questions over and beyond which could not have been taken up in the panel, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will try to reach out back to you probably on email and see if this conversation can be continued further. As I promised to you at the beginning of the session, we wanted to keep DataBeat on the, this session was not about DataBeat. This session was about how publishers and SSPs can make the most of what Ads.txt can provide them, right? But on the closing note, yes, DataBeat works with Adtech partners across the spectrum, publishers, SSPs, the product companies, a team of almost 250 people led by founder CEO Ashok, who is also on the panel today. So on that note, thank you all once again, and I'm happy we just had a 5-minute overrun. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a good day.